So people are doing this work. They have developed some ideas about what kinds of innovations, what kind of instructional improvements they want to launch. Things are moving forward, and this is all about working together through ups and downs. And when people think about complex instructional systems, and you think about ups and downs, you might think about students who are resisting some kind of new set of practices, parents who are concerned about how things are going, if it's a technology-based innovation, whether or not the technology is up to speed, if it's a curricular innovation, do people understand it well enough? One of the things that we've said throughout in terms of our talk about working together through ups and downs is that actually one set of tools to regularly come back to through this is actually not so much any of those technical pieces, but how we think about the quality of our conversations. That ultimately there are certain kinds of conversations that we can be having with the folks that we're trying to launch innovation with that can help us work through those ups and downs. Why is it that of all the different things that we might think about, important to think about when addressing ups and downs, that the quality of conversation is one of the most powerful ones for us to go back to?
And we tend not to think of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's in part what we've talked about before, this kind of individualistic cultural heritage, you might say, of school. Well, if it's not working, I got to fix it. I'm the teacher, right?
Yep.
It didn't work out, I go think about it tonight and I'll come back and fix it tomorrow. Whereas if we're steadily nudging the climate and culture to be one that's more collaborative, then we're a little more predisposed to say, gee, it didn't quite work out. It's not what I had in mind. Maybe I'll go talk to Frida about that. You know, we kind of bring our challenges up with each other because we're building that collaborative environment. But I don't think it's what happens automatically. I think you're absolutely right. There's a couple of things that are required, you might say, developmentally. I mean, one of the hardest things for a professional to do often is to ask another professional for help. Because it almost like violates the ethos of being a professional. I should be able to do this myself.
Yeah.
And it's, in some sense, at a very personal level, it's about being vulnerable. And oftentimes that's one of the critical developmental steps for a competent or a budding professional to realize, well, part of being a professional is to recognize that I am kind of stumped or it's not working the way I want, and to go ask somebody for help. And the reciprocal of that is to not just turn around and tell the people all the things they have to do to fix their problem.
Right.
So it's another way into this whole conversational space. You know, one person who kind of exposes themselves a little bit and asks for help, and the other person says, well, let me tell you what to do.
Yeah.
It's not much of a conversation either.
Right.
So it's the ability to kind of really take in the other person's reality, and really, rather than just giving them advice, they always say, you know, free advice is worth what you pay for it. Rather than just giving them advice, to say, yeah, you know, it is a tough one. I've had travels like that before. I'm not sure. Let's talk about it. What actually happened? What did you do? What happened? You know, did you gather any kind of evidence of what the kids, whatever leads to a deeper conversation. So if you think about it just this way, these are truly complex problems.
Yeah.
We're venturing into new territory. Nobody has the answer. One of our themes, you know, throughout this whole thing, nobody has the answer.
Especially nobody has the answer for your group of kids in your particular context.
We are going to have to continually keep deepening our ability to help each other and get better and better at having those kind of conversations that really are, I would call them, truly reflective professional conversations.
I was visiting a classroom in Singapore. It was taught by a second-year teacher, and she did a lesson. It was a very ambitious lesson. There were lots of different technology-mediated components that she wanted into it, and there are certain parts of the technical things she'd done really well, but actually the lesson itself was kind of a flop. In particular because she lost track of these sort of core questions of what is it that I'm trying to teach, and are my students
too busy trying to get her technology to work.
Too busy trying to get technology to work to remember these sort of core questions. So then we went a little later into a conference room. This young woman sitting at the head of the conference room, and there are maybe 12 of us who are around the table, some people from the ministry, some school leaders, some other teachers. just giving this person tons of feedback, and she's really open to it. I mean, first of all, it was unusual that she was, super comfortable having 12 people in her room,
Wow.
but then also really comfortable having people
Yeah.
from the U.S., people from the Ministry of Education giving feedback on her lesson. I thought, this is really striking that she's
Yeah.
comfortable with this. And one clue that I got to why that worked was at the end of that meeting, as we were walking out the door, we heard some whisperings that were along the lines of, where was the department chair in this? Where was the assistant principal? How is it possible that a lesson of this level of quality, which isn't what we expect in our schools, sort of got to be? And I realized, oh my goodness, that individual teacher doesn't own entirely the quality of that lesson. The entire school has some responsibility for the quality of that lesson. That, something that's very different from our American classrooms is
Right.
the sense that if something bombs in my classroom, I'm
Yeah.
100% responsible for it. It sounds like that kind of environment where there's a there's shared ownership of
Yeah.
learning quality and instructional quality might
Yeah.
be symptomatic of a kind of place where these productive conversations can happen.
Well, it's symptomatic in places where they might happen a little more naturally. It doesn't mean they automatically happen, having worked in a lot of Asian cultures also. But I think you're touching on something that is really important, and that is that while the innovative process by its nature is somewhat individualistic, and it's got to be done here with these kids in this setting, otherwise it's just talk.
Yeah.
The idea that we're collectively creating a space or a cultural milieu to support it is also really important. So again, it's another one of those paradoxes: intensely individual and individualistic, inherently collective.
Yeah.
Yes, both. I mean, I think the biggest problem, frankly, that often Westerners have, we don't like those kind of statements. We want it to be one or the other. We tend to be very dichotomous. Is it this or is it that? And most Asians will go, yes. So they can embrace the true dilemmas, which just means two propositions, right? Dilemma. And I think that's really crucial for innovation, that embracing that it is very individualistic. If somebody doesn't have the courage to step ahead, it won't happen, and it's inherently collective. So how do we create a culture that appreciates that?
Right. Those are great questions to be wrestling with.